All right, so this is Little Miss Magic by Roger Hargreaves, read by Mrs. Yates. And there's Koji and Bruno. Maybe they'll sit and listen to the story. All right, early one morning in summer, Little Miss Magic awoke in the bedroom of Abracadabra Cottage, which was where she lived. She yawned a yawn and got out of bed. Okay, there you go. She went to the bathroom to clean her teeth. Squeeze, she said to the tube of toothpaste, and guess what? The tube of toothpaste jumped up and squeezed itself onto Little Miss Magic's toothbrush. Honestly, Little Miss Magic isn't called Little Miss Magic for nothing. When she tells something to do something, it does it. She went downstairs to the kitchen. Boil, she said to the kettle. And it did. Toast, she said to the toaster. Spread, she said to the knife. And the knife jumped up and spread some butter on the toast. Pour, she said to the teapot. And she sat down to breakfast. Don't you wish you could do things like that? I sure do. I'd tell my house to clean itself. She was enjoying a second cup of coffee when there was a knock at the kitchen door. Open, she said to the door. And as it did, there stood Mr. Happy, looking exactly the opposite. You don't look your usual self, remarked Little Miss Magic. What's the matter? Everything, replied Mr. Happy. Come in and have a cup of tea and tell me all about it. Pour, she said to the teapot. Now, said Little Miss Magic, what is it? It's Mr. Tickle. He's become absolutely impossible. What do you mean? Asked Little Miss Magic. Well, he used to go around tickling people every now and then, but now he's going around tickling people all the time, he sighed. Little Miss Magic looked at him. It can't be that bad. It's worse. Cheer up, she grinned. Come on, she said. After you, said Little Miss Magic to Mr. Happy. Close, she said to the door, and off they set from Abracadabra Cottage. Oh, look at him go. Mr. Tickle was feeling fine. What a Monday morning he was having. He tickled Mr. Mean until he moaned, and Mr. Greedy until he groaned, and little Miss Sunshine until she shivered, and Mr. Quiet until he quivered, and little Miss Plump until she sobbed, not to mention the postman, a policeman, the doctor, 3 dogs, 2 cats, and a worm. Wow, that's a lot of tickling. Aha! cried Mr. Tickle as he spied Little Miss Magic and Mr. Happy. Anyone for tickles? And he rushed up to them, reaching out those extraordinarily long arms of his with those particularly ticklish fingers on the ends of them. Little Miss Magic looked at Mr. Happy. I see what you mean, she said, and winked. Do you see the unhappy little worm right there? He's very unhappy. There you go. She pointed at Mr. Tickle's extraordinarily long right arm. Shrink, she said. And then she pointed to Mr. Tickle's extraordinarily long left arm. Shrink, she said. And as you remember, when Little Miss Magic tells something to do something, it does it. So what do you think happens to his arms? Oh, Mr. Tickle's arms were suddenly not extraordinarily long. They were extraordinarily ordinary. That's not fair, he cried. You spoiled my fun. It might have been fun for you, remarked Mr. Happy, but it wasn't much fun for anybody else. Come and see me tomorrow, said Little Miss Magic to Mr. Tickle. Oh, look, the worm is giggling at poor Mr. Tickle. There, she said to Mr. Happy. Happy now? Mr. Happy smiled that famous smile of his. I'll say, he said. Come on, he added, I'll buy you lunch. And off they went to his favourite restaurant, Smiler's. I wonder what your favourite restaurant is. I think mine is Panera Bread. On Tuesday, Mr. Tickle went to Abracadabra Cottage. He knocked at the front door. Open, she said. Oh, hello, smiled little Miss Magic as the door opened by itself and she saw who was standing there. Come in. I suppose you'd like me to make your arms long again, she said. Oh, yes, please, said Mr. Tickle. Very well, she said. Mr. Tickle's face lit up. On one condition, she added. His face fell. You are only allowed 1 tickle a day. 1 tickle a day, said Mr. Tickle. That's not much. Promise, said little Miss Magic. Mr. Tickle sighed. I promise, he said. Poor Mr. Tickle, how is he going to live with only 1 tickle a day? Grow, said little Miss Magic, and both Mr. Tickle's arms grew back to their original long length. Don't forget now, she reminded him, 1 tickle a day, or else, she added. Mr. Tickle went out through the door. Goodbye, she said to him. Shut, she said to the door. Mr. Tickle stood outside little Miss Magic's cottage. Well, he thought, 1 tickle a day is better than no tickles a day. It was then that he saw one of the downstairs windows of Abracadabra Cottage was open. 1 tickle a day, he thought, and a smile came to his face. 1 tickle a day, he thought. So who do you think he's going to tickle outside Abracadabra Cottage? And on Tuesday morning, as one of those extraordinarily long arms reached in through the open window of Abracadabra Cottage, the small smile on the face of Mr. Tickle turned into a giant grin. And that is the end of the story. I hope you liked it, and I hope you join me again for another story. Have a great day and stay safe.